Hello and welcome to Movie Buffs, a show where the action is the juice and where we live our lives a quarter mile at a time. I'm your host, Cisco from Misfit Minded. You can follow me on all the socials at misfit_minded and my website, misfitminded.com.
And I'm your other host, Shani B. You can find me on all the socials at It's Me, Shani B.
Each week we take the red pill and use our certain set of skills to break down the best action films of all time. Today we're talking about the 2004 film Hellboy.
60 years ago, they tried to destroy the world. They're back. There are things that go bump in the night, and we are the ones who bump back.
Skip to the end, will you? How do I kill it?
We should be running.
It's coming for us!
Hellboy, are you gonna be okay?
How big can it be?
PG-13.
Amazing.
If you haven't seen it, it's about Hellboy, a demon raised from infancy after being conjured by and rescued from the Nazis, who grow up to become a defender against the forces of darkness, working with a special department of the FBI. He works to thwart Rasputin, yes, that Rasputin's plan to use him and a bunch of rapidly reproducing tentacled creatures to bring about the apocalypse. To get this bullet train started, let's take the listeners back to April 2nd, 2004. It was made for $66 million and grossed a little over $99 million worldwide. So pretty successful. Garnered one sequel, still waiting for that third one, even though Guillermo del Toro confirmed it's never going to happen. So single tier for that one. But yeah, let's jump right into our first segment then, called Getting the Band Back Together.
I don't have friends. I got family.
In this segment, we take a slow motion look at the filmmaking choices that went into the film and the ass kickers responsible. This movie was written and directed by Guillermo del Toro, and I believe it's based on a graphic novel. I'm pretty sure.
Comic books, yeah, definitely.
Comic book, okay, yeah. So yeah, it had some IP coming towards it, but I definitely see a bit of Guillermo's flair and style definitely coming through in the filmmaking. What really stands out for you?
Well, I just wanted to mention that because I have never read the comics, but I do like that
Same.
they have that old trope that a lot of these 2000 superhero movies did, where it's like the comic books exist in the world that they're in. And so
Yeah.
I like the joke where he's like, I hate those things. They never get the eyes right. Because
Yes.
in a lot of the other ones like X-Men, I'm thinking of when it's always the same complaint of like they never get the facts right. Like that's what I was expecting him to say. So I do like that they kind of sidestepped that and did a little something a little different because he's a pretty vain, egotistical guy. So I think it falls in line with his
Yes.
character trait. So I think in general, this was an interesting rewatch. It's not one I go back to a ton from Guillermo del Toro's filmography. I love him as a filmmaker. I like that he goes into these different, I was looking at his filmography last night and I just was like, man, they're like, even though they're a lot of creature stories, they're all so different. Like it's really hard to rank them. I was kind of like trying to determine where I would put Hellboy. And I think I came out to it's about middle of the pack for me. I don't think
Okay.
it's one of his best ones. I don't think it's one of his worst ones, but I do think it's still pretty good. Like the filmmaking in it, I like, it's still 2000 superhero shit. So like we're still trying to figure out how to make an origin story. This one's a little long at like 2 hours and 15 minutes, honestly. So I think Marvel kind of figured that out where it's like, we don't need, let's boil the stuff down and then we can put more stuff in the next movie. Like
Right.
we weren't there yet. So you can tell he tried to put in a lot in this one. And so it makes it a little slow. This one honestly is always playing on cable, I always notice. And I do feel like it's not a great cable movie. It's not like there's not a huge amount of action in it. Like every
Right.
time I see it on and I like flip to it, I just change the channel to something else. It's not, you really have to like sit through the entire thing to get into the groove of it, I think.
Yeah.
So, and so like that's why it was nice to revisit it because I haven't seen it in so long in the full thing. I probably did see this in the theater. But yeah, overall, I think the cinematography was really stood out to me. Guillermo del Toro, like we said, great director. He has a really good eye for visuals. Even though this one's like really ambitious with the CGI and stuff like that, which we'll get into. He's still using practical, which I really love. Like one of the things I'm lower on Blade 2 than a lot of people prefer that to the first Blade. I don't know what they're smoking. It's not that I don't think it's that good, and I think that one is even more egregious with the CG, like where it just takes me
Agreed.
out of it. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
there's again really interesting concepts with the Dracula in that one, but like I just think the execution was a little off. And so this one I feel like he's hitting like a lot more. And I think this one's after Blade 2 as well. So maybe he's like, getting a little more comfortable with using that new technology. Um
Right.
Still some rough areas, but I think as an origin story, as like an early superhero movie and just like a character I'm just not familiar with, I do think this is still, worth your time. It's one that I feel like doesn't get brought up or talked about, and I'm sad that we're not going to see the third one. I would have liked to see that. I think two improves on this one in a lot of ways. So I think that the third one could have been like even the best one. I think maybe box office wise, I'm not sure why they won't. That's usually how it always boils down to. And I'm nervous for Mad Max right now because Furiosa is not doing great, and
Ah,
it's getting the best reviews. You know what I mean? So it's like it's always that compromise of like just people aren't going to see these like really wild stories like Mad Max or Hellboy
I
as
don't know.
other ones. I
I
don't
feel
know.
like that to me is a little bit more representative of them like trying to compete with each other. Like Mad Max was coming out against Garfield, a children's family movie that's gonna steal a whole lot of money no matter what. Instead of waiting till this
But
coming
are
weekend, where like literally nothing's coming out. There is
are
no
those
big
kids
movie
aren't
for
going
it
to
to
see
compete with.
Furiosa though. It's two different.
Yeah, but the dad who might have tried to go out with his like guy friends or the parents
I
who might
guess
have
that's
tried to go
true.
on a date, they got to take their stupid kids to Garfield now, you
Yeah. He
know?
hates lasagna.
um
Oh.
yeah, I guess like it's just like not the same thing where where everyone's going to the movie every weekend. You
Isn't
got to be
isn't Chris
smarter.
Pratt Garfield too, by the way?
He is the voice of all the
I
children's
was just gonna
characters
say, I
in
feel
this
like we
time.
need to start a petition that, to Hollywood producers that there are other voice actors and actors in Hollywood. Chris
There are.
Pratt does not need to be every single like I don't blame him, he's just taking the job, you know what I mean? And I
Totally.
think he has kids too, and like that's the whole thing. But like, yeah, I mean, come on, guys, be creative. Like, Jesus, there people are actual voice actors. Like, I actually thought like for how bad those Bill Murray ones are, like Bill Murray inspired casting for Garfield. Like that is who you want.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I feel like these kinds of fantastical stories, they're interesting when they have to come up against something that's a little bit more standard and kind of like in the mainstream, like a children's family movie kind of is. And I do think that's like sort of what's interesting about how Guillermo del Toro makes a monster movie. It's like
hmm
somehow geared towards like a family always, which I find to be really interesting.
Well, I
And I
think
wanted to
he I think he wants to like get the drama out of it. And I think that's why like his ones that are like Shape of Water, for example, and like Pan's Labyrinth, I think when he like can take it more seriously and he doesn't have to like you can tell even in Hellboy he's not that interested in the action scenes as much honestly
he's
like
more interested in the family.
yes
Yeah.
exactly I agree 100%, like I definitely felt that as well, that like he's kind of trapped in this comic book story when he's really interested in like the relation. There's so much time spent on the relationship between Hellboy and Selma Blair here. It's like it's crazy. It's like they would never, that would be the first thing they would cut today. Like cut down on
Exactly.
that. You don't need Hellboy following her on the date. Even though I do love that scene just because of him and the kid,
Yep.
just like they don't look like spies, like and like,
Yeah.
are you gonna eat that cookie? He's like, no, no, you can have it. Like that
I
I
mean,
think when Hellboy can be like with other people and like kind of have that humor come off naturally, I think that's when it kind of works best for me.
yeah, I mean, that's another thing I really love just about a lot of Guillermo's like early movies. They almost always involve Ron Perlman. He's like one of the stands that's in,
Always. I love that.
helps him
Yeah.
tell these
It's his
stories.
De Niro.
And yeah, he's such charisma as Hellboy. I really wanted to go back and rewatch this movie just because I do often revisit the second one more
Yes.
often. Like more often it's available to me on a streamer and I'm sort of like, "Oh yeah, I do kind
I
of like
also
that
play
vibe."
that
It's
one on
a
cable as
fantasy
well a
thing.
lot more, and I think that one's a
Yeah.
better cable movie, if we're being honest. Yeah.
Agreed, agreed. But yeah, I think revisiting it, it does have a lot of the things you're mentioning where, it has these amazing practical things. And I think that's part of like when he does something practically, the creatures that he creates and the way he captures them always looks amazing. It's
His
just that strange line between CG and practical that like it always looks really bad in these early 2000s
Yeah,
movies.
I didn't get to watch the special features, but I did when I watched I don't know, did we do an episode on Blade 2 in our early iterations maybe
I think
of
we
the
just
show?
only did Blade. Yeah, we've only
Okay.
done Blade so far.
I did watch Blade 2. Maybe when we did that, I just went and booted up Blade 2 or whatever. And
Mhm.
I did watch the special features for that, which was like insane amount of special features. Like, and his drawings and sketches of the creatures were like so amazing. Like his imagination, like with coming up with that stuff, is like I would just watch like a sketchbook, movie of that. Like
Yeah.
they're so incredible because I that's like one thing I don't have a crazy imagination. So when I see these people that just like flow that out, I'm just always impressed by that. But it's like what you said, it's like with the CG, it's a gift and a curse because, with the movement, a lot of this like really fast movement with these huge creatures, you would not be able to get that in practical. And so he's trying to blend the two, which I appreciate. But yeah, there's some rough spots here, like what we're talking about, where it's early 2000, not like Ghost Rider rough, or I'm trying to think of like other superhero
Yeah.
movies that like really shit the bed with that. But yeah, it's not that
But it's
bad, but
true. Yeah, thankfully we're still like early in on it, so he does have to, he does get to build these amazing practical sets, which I think look so
oh
good.
yeah,
He does always have a stellar costume designer bringing to life, like bringing character through what these people are wearing and the costumes like how Hellboy's whole entire setup is just so amazing. And I feel like, if like it was a year or so later they might have abandoned that and tried to do some Green Lantern bullshit and, like,
right. Oh yeah,
fully
it's not that
computerize
bad.
it.
Exactly, that's another example. Yeah.
Exactly.
Um,
But, like, that practical nature of, like, how real and grounded his suit looks and, like, his whole costume looks is just, like, unparalleled. I love revisiting that just because it's some classic movie making.
Yeah, I think if we had to give out a gold star for this category of the filmmaking, I agree. It would have to go to the set design and the costume design. I mean,
The
those
props.
things are like flawless. Like, I mean, yeah, and like just the everything on Hellboy has to be so much bigger. So I like his gun is like massive. Like even
Yes.
like the bullets that he has to put in there,
Yep.
his like trench coat. It's just like a very unique like classic noir look to this
Yeah.
like devil character. Which is just like it's such an interesting combination. And then yeah, just like all the sets of like I love the when the FBI guy like goes down into this like underworld of the FBI and he sees all this, the tank with the fish guy in there. And
Yes.
I love like even the bad guys, like some of their stuff is not fully explained, but just visually you just see this guy that can't die and he's just uses swords, like hit all of that like
So creative.
characterization through the design elements I thought were like really well done. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's definitely what I always think of when I think of these movies, regardless, is I'm like, it's just gonna look really cool. The creature design is gonna be amazing. And they do, for having that CG, there's still that sequence where he fights the creature like in the subway. That thing
Hmm.
is a full prosthetic creature, like that somebody is manning basically.
Yeah.
And they do find a way to still try to use that
Isn't
real
that wild?
quality.
I was like,
So
I had
awesome.
forgot. I was stunned. Like that was like, man, like I can't remember the last time like we had a man in a suit movie where it's literally just a man in a suit. It's not like some CGI creature. I'm like trying to pin down the year when we just fully abandoned that. I mean, but
I feel like
it
it's
had to be
kind of
shortly
right around
after.
here.
It had to be
Yeah, it's
shortly
like
after
right
that.
around here for sure.
Yeah.
And that's what's so great about Guillermo is he doesn't really abandon that fully. Like his other ride or die, Doug Jones, the
Oh
guy who
yeah.
always dresses up as his creatures, is still there in Pan's Labyrinth 2 years later, fully in costume and being this creature. So
And his
there's
makeup in here
something
too is like, I mean, it's just like even when he's out of the water, like you can just see like he's just fully like sweaty and wet all the time. It's like, and I'm
Yeah.
just thinking about the amount of time that him and Ron Perlman had to be sitting in that chair, like
Ugh,
because
hours.
it's not like sometimes it's just face, or something like
Right.
that. Like they are full body, like Ron
Mhm.
Perlman's whole chest, his arm, like, and
Yep.
then the fish guy, you can tell he's like wearing gloves, like the suction gloves. Like
Yes.
it's really like something you don't see anymore. So I definitely appreciated that.
And that's another like great thing about Guillermo too is that like he really respects monsters. So the way that he captures them and the way that he has them built and wants them to be portrayed and seen is like so thoughtful. Like it does think of all of the tiny details of like what does this fish man need when he's outside of the water. And rewatching this, I was like, I bet he was like dying to make The Shape of Water the second he started making this Hellboy. Like that he
Right.
was like, I'm so interested in this guy. I have to make the Hellboy story,
Well,
but I'm not gonna forget about this guy.
it's totally Creature from the Black Lagoon. Like he loves that story, and like
Yep.
so I feel like this was like his first crack at it, and Shape of Water is like 100% like his
Yeah, the
version of.
pristine version.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, yeah, and I really like the, this like we're talking about, the CG's not great, but I do think that the animation of, like, the baby Hellboy is really
I was
cute.
I was cracking up. I definitely was with the, eating the baby Ruth bars.
Yep,
Just
yep.
chowing down, and he's like, "Come on, it's like you're safe." And they keep calling him a red ape, like
Yes, yes.
it's
Yeah,
just
just
yeah,
just
it is cute. You can't deny it, but it was reminding me of we were just talking about the Rise of the Planet of the Apes and how that first one it wasn't fully there 100% yet. It was probably like 80% like
right,
there. And
right.
so and then with Dawn, it was like damn near 100%. Like it was just
Yeah,
you can that's the one thing you cannot pick apart in that movie. Like they totally figured out the VFX and yeah, I'd be interested to go back in Hellboy 2 and see like how those
it's on
VFX,
Max.
you know,
Yeah, I
uh,
queued it right up. I was like, "Okay,
oh,
now
okay.
I need to see the growth."
What did you
And I
think?
think that
Did
I
you
still
watch it?
really like it. I like the second one a whole lot
But as
just
far as
from
like
the
the
jump.
CG, like the
Um
jump from that, because that's like a few years later.
It's better. It's much better.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
It's at a time where now I think he's really figured out what should stay practical because there's still amazing practical things that are happening in the second one and where you really do need to use the computer to like stretch
Yeah,
the
I mean,
truth
don't
for
they,
you.
like, go to hell? Like, there's, like, all these
The Golden
creatures
Army.
that they encounter in that. That's, like, what I remember the most is just, like, that
Yeah,
whole
they
world.
sort of go to a Harry Potter style
Yep,
like Diagon Alley
yep.
situation that's pretty cool. But it's definitely there's still so much practical stuff in that second one because I think just like Dawn, when you're making this kind of movie, there's like a kind of learning curve you can't avoid. It's too in depth of a kind of film. You have to think about and make something so unrealistic realistic and that's just like a really hard thing to just nail the first time you try it. But he
Right.
does get pretty close, like there is so much heart in this, like lots of it's very cool, even though it's sort of early 2000s and we're not really in the superhero heyday yet, but we really want to be. There's just
We had,
such a
like
great like
I think we
care
had, like,
for it.
X-Men already. We probably had, like, Fantastic Four, the first one around this time, but it was very Punisher came out this year.
Yeah, like
Um,
it wasn't like a genre the way that today it's a
yeah.
really clearly defined genre, I
It
feel
was
like.
just for the nerds. It was just for
Yeah, it was like, we know
Yeah.
these people love this, so we're just gonna put it out and like accept the niche audience. They never could have seen that they would be getting like all the entire
Run
audience to get
everything.
on board one
Yeah.
day. But yeah, yeah, lots of little details in here that I like, especially the little rock cover of the Red Right Hand. I was like, oh, all right, a
Oh,
little
yeah.
little scream shout out for me because
Yeah,
I
the
always,
music
of
was
course,
pretty good
associate
too,
that.
like, where it was like
Mm-hmm.
I was that was another surprise, I guess, was, like, the use of soundtrack, which forgot, like, I just thought this would be, like, fully scored,
Right.
but they play, like I guess to make it feel more modern, with, like, those kinda old school aesthetics, with, like,
Yeah.
the record player and all these, you know
And, like, the noir elements, there
Yeah,
really are noir elements to this, which is such an interesting thing you don't
mhm.
necessarily see coming.
Yeah, and he still can pull out a one-liner too, you got the best of both worlds,
He really
I
does.
think my favorite one was he was with the tongue creature, and he grabs the tongue, and he's like, "No tongue, second date."
That's right. It's true. Yeah,
Oh, man,
he's really sending quips out, and that's, like, a great part about,
loved
the
it.
just the casting of, like, they did do that reboot situation with David Harbour, and I love David Harbour. He's
Yeah.
great, but there is just something about how like Ron Perlman just like
It was
knows
depressing. It
how
was
to be
depressing,
Hellboy.
honestly, that one. It
That
was
one, that one used way
and
too
Mila
much CG.
Jovovich.
That's another one.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it was
she's a queen in her own right, but just elsewhere,
yeah.
unfortunately.
Yeah, let's get
But
into the cast though.
let's
You
do
wanna
it. Yeah,
introduce
that awesome. That brings us to our next segment. Choose your fighter.
Welcome to the party, pal!
This is where we take a look at all of the bros and babes that flex their acting muscles and sometimes their real muscles for us movie buffs. The film stars John Hurt, Doug Jones, Rupert Evans, Selma Blair, and Ron Perlman as Hellboy. We already mentioned a lot of these people, but let's get into like what you think of their performances. More specifically, what did you think? Who stood out to you?
I think it is really well cast. I feel like
Yeah,
everybody just does a good job with their assignment. Like I love John Hurt as sort of like this old professor guy, just
he's
like
really
bringing
good.
that
I
British
I forgot
energy.
he was in here, and like
Yes.
he, that's a character where I feel like is so easy to get wrong in this type of movie, where like you just
Mm-hmm.
want to see him die, and like there's a little bit of that, but like that moment at the end where he has that little, that's not how you light a cigar. You always light it with a match because it savors the flavor, and then like Hellboy's
Yes.
like, thanks. Like I'm like, that's the type of male bonding that Hellboy can do is over a cigar.
Yes.
That's
But
like
that's
the extent,
also
you know?
yep, the unique family dynamics that again Guillermo's like able to kind of capture and capitalize on with this casting. Like these are two men that are kind of like, John Hurd couldn't ever have a family because of the world that he has to interact with and be a
Mhm.
part of. And so instead he gets to be a father to this
He's so
demon
good in this
creature.
too. Yeah,
Yeah.
he's really like I think my favorite scene with him, that was probably my favorite Tambor scene, but my favorite John Hurt scene was when, his death, which is coming, and he's like say, say his birth name or whatever, and he's like, I call him the day he was born, my son, and then goes out
Right.
like a G,
Yep.
and even though he gets killed, they do him, I guess, the good service of making it quick, but because he didn't kill Hellboy back then, he raised him as his son. But
Yeah, I
yeah, he
loved
brings a
him.
lot of heart and like as the father figure. And honestly, like if I had a complaint, I feel like I could have used more of him in this.
Yeah.
And like to really pin down that family dynamic. I'm just gonna go out and say it. I think the main character, FBI guy, is like completely throw that guy out. Like he didn't do
He's just
anything for
milk
me.
toast.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so
Mm-hmm.
it's like I get like I think that to me that reads as like studio note bullshit of like we need an audience surrogate to introduce us to this world. And it's like
Right.
we don't though. Like John Hurt is a human. He could be, like and he could be the one like because he starts off narrating the story and then the FBI guy takes it over in the last, couple of scenes. And it's like, no, this is
Mm-hmm.
John Hurt's story with Hellboy. Like,
Yeah.
it's they're trying to like bring him in and then they just they throw him away in the second one. It's like they
They
almost knew,
do.
you know what I mean? Like, so,
Yeah,
uh,
they do. Especially because like, they sort of make it as though his character needs to be there for, like, the folklore of the story, but they also kind of abandon that too, that, like,
yeah.
they needed some sort of, like, naive, person to be a part of how the story unfolds, but I do feel like there still could have been like, there was more room for that, like, whole maybe love triangle that they also tried to spin
Or even like
make some
Selma
kinda
Blair.
sense.
Selma Blair is like more human. Why not make her the main character? Or you know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like because there's some human elements and like make the story about her struggling to have a relationship with this guy and
Yeah.
be in the modern world. But again, this was 2000s when we weren't giving female superheroes. I guess Elektra was around this time, but still.
But
Uh
yeah, I guess like it is that push and pull between like I think her character is so interesting, sort of like trying to just be a regular person, but also like can't help but be a
yeah.
monster, like Firestarter style. And I do feel like we like lost the ability to have her juggle the two worlds the way that this guy was
Yeah, it gets
supposed
kind of
to.
lost because when he takes over,
Yeah,
it's like, "What's this love triangle about?" I'm like, "I don't care." Like, I don't.
it's not anything like they
Yeah,
can't be together. Like
right. It's like you're
yeah.
just the first guy that she met that's not in this like crazy family. So
Right.
yeah,
Yeah, that like knows her secret or whatever and
so
isn't
you're
gonna
not
judge
special
her,
in any
but
way. I guess it'd be different if he was like an expert on something or like he was the human guy. You know what I mean? Like but
Right,
it's just
right.
the fact they make him so naive and he doesn't really do anything. Like there's nothing he doesn't serve any
No.
function to the story.
Yeah, I feel like he should have had like an unknown superpower or monster situation within him that was going to be brought out by
Maybe
working
he's like a
here.
sharpshooter or something, like or a sniper, like
Anything,
anything.
you
Like
know?
yeah, he's good with guns. He
Seriously.
knows how to. He's a SWAT guy, or he knows how to handle himself. Something.
Yeah, he supposedly went to Quantico, but then he like doesn't really ever show off having any special skills either. Like it is sort of like he's weirdly just there, and I guess like that's fine, you know. He
Yeah,
kind
why
of
did
fades
John
into the
Hurt
background. We
handpick
don't
this
need
guy?
him.
Because he says that at one point. I handpicked you out of 10 candidates, and it's like, really? Why?
Yeah.
Why this
For
guy?
what? And I guess he died too soon, so we never really got to learn why.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do think other than that, the casting is done so well. I feel like Selma Blair is such an interesting actor. I love the characters that she plays, and I like the way she plays people because she kind of plays people that are got like the character may or may not be written as guarded, but she has this like unique form of like I'm guarded, so I'm gonna kind of welcome you
Yeah.
in. I'm gonna try to always invite you in a way. And I feel like that quality works so well here because she's kind of like rocking that amazing beret and just being like, I want to just have a normal life.
The one part, yeah, like back to that part where like Hellboy spy on him, like that was one of the parts I laughed the most was when he buys her a coffee and he's like, she's laughing. He buys her a coffee and she's laughing. He says it like 5 times. I'm like, that's good acting. If you're delivering the same line like 4 different ways and I'm laughing like each way, dude. It was Ron
So
Perlman
good.
really great in this movie. Like,
Yeah, he really is. He is the only person I'd want to see Hellboy, and I do feel like if they were gonna try to do it again, I feel like he can still do it. I know he's like
yeah.
much older now. It's been a while, 20 years. But I still feel like I wish they would have just brought him back and tried to close out this franchise rather than
Because
thinking they
yeah,
could just
he
start it again.
to me he is Hellboy, like you said. Like it's like Deadpool and Ryan Reynolds, Hugh Jackman and Wolverine. There's just some of these people that it's like they cast it so right the first time. Like you do not need to recast it. And if you do, you better make sure like it's super airtight.
Something else.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, he's got the quippiness, like I think there's like that stoicism to him too, like no pun intended with his rock hand, but like and yeah, he just plays off of like everyone like really well. Like not too unlikable, but still like has that like attitude and sarcasm where everyone's just like, we're just done with this guy. Like he's just a kid, he's a teenager,
Yes.
like
Yes, he's
uh
very immature. He ages slower than all of us, and we're just trying our best to endure it.
constantly
But
eating.
yeah, in drinking Bud Lights, like
Yeah.
what an interesting character this guy is. Like it's a hard thing for someone to try to understand, but he really finds a way to ground him. And I think like that's what's kind of fun about this too is that like a lot of the other side characters like Tambor and some of the FBI guys that are just like around that are kind of part of this ragtag thing, they try to have strong character things, but it's just like, you know, if Hellboy's around, you have to watch him. He's the most compelling.
Yeah, I think I'll say the other two people I feel like I so one I could have gone like so the bad guy I think is pretty weak, Rasputin. I think that's one of the other
He's
characters I feel like
random.
he
Yeah.
just needs more to do, or we need like more motivation to understand like it's just very generic, like he's a Nazi, he wants to see the end of the world. And it's like I
Right.
guess we've seen that so many times at this point that it just it just was blah for me. And then I also wanted to see more of Doug Jones as Abe Sapien. I feel like he gets kind of short shrift. I mean, like it is funny that like everything is so. This is so. This might be like too in joke comic book shit, but like when it's like whenever there's like Aquaman is on the super team, Super Friends or whatever, and it's like, oh, we just happen to have this villain who's in the water. I guess we'll call in Aquaman. So then like of
Yep.
course when they are going to the creatures, they're all in the subway under the water. And then
Right.
same thing with Hellboy. Of course, his girlfriend is the fire girl, like, and
Yep.
so they're compatible that way. But even so, like, I feel like he could talk and he was interesting and he was like
Smart.
smart. And he brought this like element to it. Like, I like his power of being able to see the past and the future by touching
Yeah.
things. I feel
Yep.
like if that was probably my favorite shot of the movie, I would have to say that where he touches John Hurt and brings him into they just pan into the museum and it goes back into
Yes.
the past. I thought that was really well done.
So he can see what
Um,
happened. Yep.
yeah, but I just wanted to see more of him. I think he gets, he basically gets taken out by the creatures, the resurrection creatures, and then you don't see him for the rest of the movie, and I was kind of bummed.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I feel like the Rasputin piece is so random because I'm not really sure kind of like if we really needed it or even needed those creatures. Like that's a little bit I'll save it for questions and plot holes for sure.
Yeah.
But I will say like, just having that awesome like sort of Nazi henchman guy that had like no eyelids and no lips, like that guy was cool enough. He seemed to be maniacal enough. He was like clever. He used ruses and he had really cool swords that were
And, like,
Deadpool style.
his girlfriend too, like, really didn't do anything, so I feel like, if anything, like, it could have been, like, just him and that guy, that his, like, assassin, and him
Mhm.
him, like, talking to the assassin and, like, explaining his plan to him, like, that could have been easy right there. Let's cinch up the plot. You don't need the girlfriend at all. She's just there to die, basically. It reminded me very much of Indiana Jones in that way, where,
Yeah.
especially, like, Last Crusade, they just go back to the Nazis and the Nazi
Yeah.
blonde.
It's tried and
uh
true.
and then especially the opening scene with, the Nazis opening the portal, that was totally Raiders of the Lost Ark at the end, like,
Yeah, especially because
yeah.
like, the portal was, like, not it didn't I didn't fully yeah, like, I guess, like, that's where the story does start to get, like, kind of convoluted and really complex, like, they're just trying to put too much into it because
Mhm.
I feel like it's so easy to, like, very quickly give the log line of the second one, like,
Yeah.
it's really straightforward compared to this, and this one is kinda like a story on top of a story on top of a story, which does slow it down a lot.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree. Let's, ready for our next segment? Think
Yeah,
that
let's do it.
our next segment is called Need for Speed.
Pain don't hurt.
This is where we do what the Oscars don't do and honor the amazing stuntmen and women for their death defying work. And we pick out the punches that knocked us out the most. All right, what are the top 3 stunts or sequences that really stood out?
Again, not a ton, so I did have to be kinda selective here. Number 3, I just said whenever Hellboy gets to use his hand, I just think it's awesome every time.
Yep.
He breaks through walls whenever there's, like, I like the one where Tambor's like, or one of the, like, other bodyguards is like, "We'll have to find a way around," and then Hellboy just like, knocks it down. So that was cool. Like, yeah, that was just cool, and then, he has to open the portal with his hand, like, turning his hand like it's a key. I just
Mm-hmm.
think, again, a really cool visual element that you never see with a superhero before. Um,
And the theme of like someone's fist being a positive is a really
yeah,
interesting just paradox.
and he even had it as a baby, which was hilarious. Where they're just like, "Look at the size of that thing." Oh, I loved it. Number 2, I just had the subway fight. I do feel like the creatures repetitive, obviously, because they just copy every time. And I do
Mm-hmm.
feel like there's 2 subway fights where it's like we really couldn't find another location to do this. But I will say, like, taken as just their separate parts, I liked both subway fights. The one where that she's like, this train was on my head, or
Yeah.
that one was pretty cool. And then where they go into the platform, a lot of good, like you said, a lot of good wire work there.
Yep.
And the hilarious, again, was cracking up with my kittens. It's like, instead of the baby, trope, it's like he has a
Yes.
box of kittens as he's like saving the day.
Loved them.
So great. And then number 1, I think I just had I love that Nazi, like, guy. Like, all of his stunts were just so cool. I think my
Yes.
favorite one was when he was just in the museum, again with that flashback sequence, and he's just taking, like, I guess if it's a stunt, it's when he blocks the bullets and it goes back up, and all the guys fall over. And then but yeah, and then he takes all the security guards like Swiss cheese. It's amazing.
Yep. Yeah, it's so cool looking. That fight choreography is really, really awesome. And yeah, I think same for me. Like I, it's not quite a stunt, but it is. I consider it a kind of stunt because I feel like they had to do it in reverse when
Mhm.
Rasputin like comes out of all the blood.
Oh
It
yeah,
just
that
kind
is
of
very
looks,
cool. And I
yeah,
and
like
and
it's just
and
cool looking.
reflective, like, mirroring Hellboy, I thought, which was cool. Like the fully red person. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, like just a cool kind of idea, and like in terms of like a stunt or something, just trying to figure out how you're gonna make that look so clean. I really appreciate. Um, I like how Hellboy flies through like multiple walls sometimes and the camera stays with him.
Yeah.
I feel like that type of shot is something that today we rely on computers to do or a green screen to do for us. And here they're definitely like layering these shots over each other to really like get the feel of him bursting through all these places. And so I really, really appreciate
I
that for
think it's
sure.
smart too because again, I'm not familiar with the comics, and so I don't know what his powers exactly are. But you get the sense very quickly this guy can
Hmm.
take a ton of pain, and he just cracks his shoulders and that's gonna hurt tomorrow, and he's good though.
Yes, yes. Yeah, I think that's like the most important stunt work that sticks out to me is that they're using wires so they can display this. So they
Yeah.
can show just how powerful he is when he moves around, when he jumps, when he punches, what he can take for sure. And I think like I really love during that subway fight when he is like, you missed because he doesn't
Oh yeah.
realize that the creature has like created
Classic,
a fall of
classic
the entire
superhero,
platform.
classic
Yeah,
superhero trope. Yep. I
exactly.
wasn't aiming for
Um,
you.
but yeah, I feel like, we of course still use wires in films today for sure, but there's something about how like you can kind of feel the wire work in this one, and I really, really like that.
I think because he's so hulking too, where sometimes I definitely could see his feet moving before he got to the floor
Right.
sometimes, which was funny. But again, I think it's just using some of that wire work that was very popular at the time too, to break physics of like this guy should not be able to move that way, but he can jump over buildings like the Hulk,
Yep.
I guess, is like the closest I could think of.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, like they're gonna figure out how to make those jumps and those transitions look really good with computers. But there is something like I really just appreciate about how fun wire work like looks and feels to watch, especially here because this movie it wants to be a lot of fun even though it is trying to be grounded at the same time.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. All right, that brings us to our next segment called Death Proof.
If he dies, he dies.
This is where we take a look at the movie's body count and see who bit the dust the hardest. What were your top three, Shanny B?
Well, I want to start with the couple of henchmen that get murked in the open, because they're kind of like a combo of a stunt and a kill. When one of them just gets like vaporized by the portal by accident, like
Hmm.
getting thrown into it. But then another guy, they like pull a whole kind of like pillar over onto the dude, and
Yeah.
it looks pretty real. Like it just looks pretty good. It was for sure a stunt and a fun kind of kill to just be like, yeah, people are gonna die here, but you're not gonna be it's not gruesome per se. It's just like kind of exciting and wild. And
Yeah.
so I like those two opening deaths because they kind of keep the like magic of what everything that's gonna be following is gonna look like when there are deaths. I also feel like the death when the Nazi creature murders Clay, the FBI guy, and just like stabs him like over and
Oh,
over
I
again.
know, that was
I was like,
brutal.
"Oh, man,
No
this is
mercy
actually,
for
like,
that
pretty
guy.
hardcore." Yeah. I was like, "Dang, I didn't think he was gonna come that hard at him."
He just
So I
got hair
really like
plugs
that.
in, he doesn't get to show off his hair plugs, his new plugs.
Yep. And that's like a stunt guy. That's a stunt actor that I've seen in a million action movies, always
Yeah,
showing up
character
ready to,
actor.
do that stuff. Yeah. And so that death is a really good one. But I also feel like the internal like monster death that happens to Rasputin when he fails is like really interesting. I feel like I wish they had done it more practically because it has some kind of like alien like influences on top of it or something, but I also don't quite understand it. So it's the death that sticks with me the most, where I'm like, I don't know what is happening to him, but I'm glad he got killed.
Yeah, I mean, I had a lot of the same. I think, Rasputin getting sucked through the portal at the beginning. I was like, man, they're really going for it right in the opening. Like, uh, so I really like how they like established that. I mentioned like the museum scene. I think again, like that's just like really well shot, well choreographed, and just any scene with that, hitman guy, like not Hitler's number one go-to assassin, we
Assassin,
find
yeah,
out. And so, he, like you said, he kills was it Clay, like that one
yeah,
was brutal. He kills John Hurt. Like he has a pretty high body count in this one. So anyone with him, I'm gonna go number one though. The one I feel like is the most representative of this movie, and I just think is just a sweet kill, is when the first subway fight, and he kills the monster by touching the rail guard and electrifying him. And then he
Yes.
just goes, he's like, "I'm fireproof," and then he lights his cigar with his hand, which is on fire. I mean, come
Yes.
on, you cannot get cooler than that, you
That's
know?
very cool. Yes. It sure is.
So that one stuck with me for sure. But yeah, that takes us to our next segment called Exit Wounds.
Come on, don't bullshit me.
All right, let's talk about the film's imperfection and decide whether they were fatal hits or just minor flesh wounds. What are your questions and plot holes for this one?
I think we talked about a lot of them. I think just with I think the villain character, very boring. I think part of one of the weakest parts of this movie is, and then the protagonist. Which is like your protagonist and your villain is weak. Like you got problems, brother. Like
Yeah.
So I think that was probably my biggest one. I think just like them hiding from the world, we do not see them doing a good job of it at
No.
all. Like we get the one Tambor interview at the beginning where like he's just denying it and like, I mean, what camera do I look into? Like, and just like doing such a good job. He brings a lot of good comedy in this too. So I think that was just my biggest one. Story wise, was just like they're doing such a horrible job at hiding it. It's like when they're running through that like Halloween parade, he's like, "Yeah, trick or treat, lots of good costumes, right?" It's like, bro, come on.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's like my biggest thing is they yada yada certain things that I'm sort of like, why yada yada that thing? Like,
Mhm.
it's funny to me that they randomly, like Blue randomly is like psychic in all these amazing ways, can see the future and pass through an item, but can't solve the Rubik's Cube, which I'm
Yeah.
like, that's so random,
I
such a
definitely wrote
waste.
that down too. I was like, he's like, I'm not good at solving puzzles. I'm like, bro, what?
Yes, you are.
Can't
Yes,
you
you
just
are.
read a book on how to solve a Rubik's Cube? I'm sure there are some out there.
Yeah, you're reading 4 at a time, guy. Come on. Yeah, that's like so random. I don't really know how they explain away what Liz is doing at the mental institution because I don't think she's at a mental institution for like superhero people
Yeah, did she
when she
check
like blows
herself
it up.
in? It's like very unclear. Like, did she
Yeah,
choose
it's
to
like
go
yada
in?
yada in a way where I'm like, I want to know this story. This is actually important information to me.
I guess the first
Um,
time I saw this, I just assumed that like she had an outburst and like they forced her to go in. But again, like you said, they never explain that. Like it's not. You're just.
right.
It's me. That's me inferring on the movie. What?
Yeah, coming up with
Yeah.
it yourself.
Yeah. So.
And yeah, so I feel a little disappointed in that type of thing. And then I guess something that always stands out to me about this and the second Hellboy is like it's really confusing how Hellboy always fulfills the plan of the villain but still wins. Like he's
Yeah.
always like, "All right, I guess I will do this thing you want, Rasputin, except I made a different choice." And I'm like, I don't
Yeah.
know what that means.
I
And
guess in
something
this
similar in the
one,
second.
they do a nice job of like, even though it's super convoluted. Like I agree. The fact that he has to do it 3 times, like he has to unlock 3 different keys. So then
Got
he
it.
stops on the third one, and then you see like the beam kind of like flicker out, like and like just like completely disappear. And you're like, okay, so he didn't finish the
The ritual.
opening the portal. Which
Right.
again, that was super weird too because it's like it had to happen on the eclipse. Like we saw in the opening minutes that they opened the portal with no eclipse, like that. So it was just
A
again,
little
I'm with
yada
you. I'm
yada.
with you.
Yeah.
It's hard to justify or explain, but
They just tried to do too much in this first one for sure.
for sure, yeah,
Absolutely.
exactly.
But yeah, yeah. All right, that takes us to our next segment, a new segment called More Firepower.
Okay, so what do you need besides a miracle?
Guns. Lots of guns.
All right, in this segment, we pick between our favorite action stars: Arnold Schwarzenegger, Sylvester Stallone, Keanu Reeves. Not an exhaustive list. I just picked 3 good ones, and you'll
The
see why in a
tops.
second. To determine who would bring the most heat to this movie if they were in the cast. Shani B, who would you think would be the best fit for this movie?
I think Keanu would be better as the main dude because he has that like earnestness and that naivete, but he's also exciting to watch.
Yeah.
And even though he's not on this list, I also thought maybe Van Damme could have been pretty good
Okay.
in this. Maybe if he was Rasputin, it could have changed how Rasputin worked. I
He's
don't know.
doing the
There's
splits.
something
He's doing the splits at the same time.
exactly like something about him, like the way that he kind of has a schmarm to him, made me be like, I kind of wish he was in this universe too. What about you?
Yeah, that was my pick as well. I thought it was no brainer. Keanu as FBI agent. Like, come on. He was born for that role. He could turn that into milquetoast, into memorable, more chemistry, maybe.
Mhm.
And then I also thought it was funny me imagining Arnold Schwarzenegger as Hellboy, you know?
Yes, yes.
I'm fireproof, you're not.
Hey, second date. Like it's
He would
I
kill the
almost feel
one-liners at
like
least.
it was written when they were gonna be like, "Hey Arnold, would you wanna play this?" Some of the writing even feels like they might have went to him with it.
Or how about if we're bringing in other guys, Dolph Lundgren as Rasputin? Why not?
Again, right? There's a lot. I like this category a lot because it's a lot of fun to imagine, like,
Yeah,
amplifying the action here. And this movie, to your point that you mentioned earlier, like, it's not super heavy action. It's not absent,
yeah.
but it's not as heavy as, like, if
I
some
mean,
of
you can
these
just
other guys
picture
were
them in
there.
certain scenes, and like I was just having so much fun, like Arnold with the kid, like
Yes.
he's
Yep.
laughing when he took a picture.
Yeah, and, like, Keanu taking the rock in the head, being like, "Oh, what?
Oh,
Who did
oh.
that? Who threw that?" Yeah, just, like, a completely something a little bit more captivating if one of our guys was there.
Yeah, Ron Perlman, like,
Um,
"What are you, a Boy Scout?" And he's like, "No, I never was." Like
it would be so good.
so I think hands down, I think this is a good start to this category. Keanu takes the cake.
You case
Winner
it.
of our very first More Firepower, definitely.
Yes.
Which brings us to our last segment, Game Over, man.
What a picture.
Good picture, yeah.
That is so much fun. I love that stuff, the killing.
A lot of killing.
Oh, yeah.
In our final segment, we're gonna rate this film out of 5 Baby Ruth bars. All right, what do you give it? What's your rating?
I think I'm gonna go 3, solid 3. For the reasons we already mentioned, so I won't go into like super detail, but I think you have a weak protagonist and a weak villain, and it's a little overlong, so it's just with those three combination, it was hard for me to stay engaged. But like we talked about, whenever Ron Perlman would be on the screen, um, or Selma Blair or Doug Jones, a lot of those things would pop, and some other things too, production design, cinematography. It's a good visual. It is a good visual. It's a good movie to maybe have it on the background, but
Totally.
it's very early superhero stuff, and you can kind of see that. And I do think in the sequel they figure out a lot of the problems with this one, and it's a better movie.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Yeah, I feel like this is just straight middle of the road. So I think I'm
Yeah,
gonna also just go with an even 3, because it has everything it's supposed to have to be a perfectly fine movie. Just isn't as great as it could be, and I totally agree that they will fix some of those things in the second, and I think they would have been able to do even more if they had rounded out the franchise.
and for folks in the comments ready to come at me, I do have this ranked higher than Blade 2. So okay, so
Yeah.
I did my GDT rankings last night. This still
Yeah.
ended up higher
No
than.
thanks on Blade 2. I straight skip it every time. I'm so surprised people really
It was
like
one
it.
of those that, like, when I was a kid, people kept telling me, "It's even better than the first," and I feel like even now,
Shocking.
people have that opinion, and I just don't know if they haven't seen it lately or, like,
It's gotta be
it's
that.
just I'm like, "It's not." Blade 1
I
is
mean, yeah, I
just a
guess the
better movie.
idea, it's just, yeah, it's not executed as well. And frankly, I really like the third one. I find the third one to be way more
See,
fun.
that one I haven't seen
Just
in a long time. I'd have to go
Yeah.
back and
I
get that one,
mean,
but
I feel like the second two become like campy in a way that kind of changes the franchise.
yeah.
But neither of them can compare to like sort of what the first starts with. And I guess that's what's interesting about franchises like this that have to mix a kind of groundedness and fantasy. Hellboy as well is like you some directors are going to try to lean into that camp and some are going to try to stay on the ground, and that's what makes Guillermo so unique is that like he never leans too far one way and like abandons his
Yeah.
vision. He just like gets better at making his vision more precise.
And I don't think Blade gets enough credit either for setting up. I mean, that was like literally one of the first superhero movies to come up with the origin story. And you can see some of those elements from the first Blade in this movie, like especially with the
Yes.
underground world, the family
Yep.
aspects, like that is all Blade 1. So yeah, we
So
ride
good.
for Blade for
We
sure.
do. We do. Yes. Yes. Awesome. All right. I think that wraps it up for us. Let's remind the people where they can find us.
Get your fix and follow the show at We Stay Buff on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, and Twitch at The Buffs. Follow me on all the socials at Misfit_Minded and my website, misfitminded.com.
Take us for a ride and subscribe to the podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And please leave a review. 5 stars, 5 stars, 5 stars. And you can follow me on all the socials at It's Me, Shani B.
Next week, we'll be covering an all-timer. This is going to be amazing. I think going off of Furiosa is a perfect companion piece of wall-to-wall action, the Raid 2. So stay tuned for that. Thanks again for listening. We'll catch you next time for another edition of Movie Buffs. Until then, stay buff.